parents that care so much about the future, as most of our grandparents do, can make a real difference. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
the senator from New York.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection, the quorum is dispensed with.
Mr. President, we're still here and we haven't really gotten much of a response from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle about our legislation that would help students throughout America pay their tuition costs and get a reasonable amount of interest on their loans. And I don't know what my colleagues are waiting for. We all know the crisis in America. College has become more and more important. To many, it's a necessity, and it's become more and more expensive. And that equation is not only hurting the kids who go to college, it is hurting their families and hurting this country. And when the percentage of people who graduate from college declines vis-a-vis other nations, that's a very bad sign for America. And our higher, we can talk about the problems of quality in our K-12 schools, and those are important issues. But our higher education system is still rated just about the best in the world. And that is shown by the fact that hundreds of thousands from around the world, including places like China and India, apply to our schools, come here, and go. It's a shame we send them back, even if they want to stay, but that's an immigration issue, not an education issue. Anyway, so our schools are great. And the big problem with higher education in America is not quality, although of course it could be made better, but it's affordability. It's not the same as K through 12. And yet, here we are, sitting here, and the other side is in a certain sense figuratively twiddling their thumbs and making it worse. How is America going to stay the greatest economic power in the world when fewer and fewer of our bright, capable, hardworking students can afford college, and when more and more of them decide that they are not going to go to school, or if they go to school, not to the college of their choice, for financial reasons? And so we put a reasonable offer on the table. The proposal, we pay for our College Tuition Act by closing a loophole that people like Rush Limbaugh said should be closed when John Edwards was found to have used it in his law firm, when other leading Republicans in 2004 said this is one of the greatest abuses of the tax code they had ever seen, and all of a sudden our colleagues on the other side of the aisle say they can't vote for it. This was an issue that was talked about as we talked about dealing with the budget gap in August or in December. It was during last year, I remember it was. And again, we didn't hear objections from the other side. Take that one off the table, we can't live with it. So it seems what's going on here is very simple. Our colleagues know that certainly it's politically unpopular, but probably it's politically wrong to allow tuition rates to double, interest rates on tuition loans to double. But they can't just say they're against it, or they tried to say they're against it. When the president went around the country and talked about it, they had to back off that. So in the House, they came up with a pay-for, which was sort of laughable. Everyone knew that would never pass, and no one took their position seriously. But we had always hoped that our colleagues in the Senate, who frankly have been much more reasonable in the last little while, we've passed a highway bill with bipartisan support, we've passed a postal reform bill with bipartisan support, we passed the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, with bipartisan support. And we thought we could get this done with bipartisan support, because our goal is not to draw a difference between the parties, that's been apparent, but to get this done. And we thought when we put our proposal on the floor, they'd accept it. At minimum, we thought that they would at least come back with a offer, let's debate it, let's try, see if their amendment passes in terms of a different pay-for, see if our amendment could get support. But instead, what have we found? A filibuster, blocking the Senate from even considering this reasonable measure. And so I'm going to yield the floor because I see my colleagues have arrived, Senator from Connecticut, Senator from New Hampshire, who I know feels strongly about this. We have an all-New England cast in the room with a little help from the Mid-Atlantic. But I hope they'll reconsider. I hope they'll reconsider because it's better for the politics of this country to come together once again on a reasonable issue, as we have done in the past few months. It's better, frankly, for their own politics, not wishing them ill, but most of all, it's better for the future of our country. So please reconsider. Let us move forward and debate this bill, and let us not let the high cost of going to college get unnecessarily higher. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored to follow my distinguished colleague from New York and his very powerful and eloquent words on a subject that concerns all of us, not only in New England, but really across the country. And I have heard from countless students in Connecticut, where we have some of the best educational institutions in the country. I know that my colleague, Senator Shaheen from New Hampshire, who has been very much in touch with the people of her state, and particularly young people there, striving, as they are in Connecticut, for more affordable education. We're talking really about the future of our country. And there should be nothing contentious, certainly nothing partisan, about this issue of financing the future of education and particularly student loans. There ought to be a common cause here, and it ought to be bipartisan. I believe eventually it will be, because we need to come together on this issue for the sake of young people whose lives are very directly and immediately impacted by this issue in Connecticut and across the country. Not only their lives, but our competitive economy, increasingly a global economy in Connecticut that depends more and more on exports and more on talented and gifted and trained, educated, skilled people. We need them in Connecticut, and we cannot permit the interest rate on Stafford loans to rise to 6.8% from its present rate of 3.4%. Even now, the debt with the present 3.4% is crushing to many of our students who are struggling to pay their student loans with that lower interest rate. Stanley Notowitz, who contacted my office, who is seeking solutions in good faith, constructively and positively, reached out to my office because he experiences the same financial hardships facing millions of recent graduates across the country. He's paying $70 a week for gas. He's providing financial support to his grandmother in her late 80s who might lose her home. He's trying to save money to get his own apartment. And he's one of the many, many students in Connecticut and across the country who have reached out, and my office has helped him. And I've also heard from Brenda Cashmere, a mother who would be crushed if she were forced to pay this higher interest rate. Again, my office has helped her to meet the ever-increasing challenges of today's economy with that student debt that now overall is the highest of any debts faced by our people as a whole, more than $1 trillion. Senators Reid and Harkin want to come to a solution that will keep the burden off the backs of students without adding to our national debt. It's not a tax increase that they propose. It is simply a solution that clarifies tax rules that are already in existence by closing a loophole. It's known as the Gingrich-Edwards loophole. I wish it weren't known by that name. But it lets lawyers, consultants, and highly paid professionals dodge payroll taxes and push that burden off on the middle class. Getting rid of this loophole is another step toward an America where everybody pays their fair share and everybody plays by the same rules. It's the America that we grew up believing in. It's the America that we continue to believe in. And some have claimed that it is an America we've lost. I don't believe it, and we can prove it by closing this loophole. The provision proposed by Senate Democrats to close this loophole is narrowly tailored to affect only wealthy individuals, those making over $200,000 for an individual or $250,000 for joint filers. And they are trying to shield their salaries from taxes, calling themselves small businesses. It will not affect the actual small businesses of this country, and it will not raise taxes for anybody who already pays what they owe in payroll taxes. This loophole should be closed independent of the student loan crisis. We're to close this loophole regardless of the challenge we face now in keeping the interest rate at 3.4%. Very simply, we're being asked to make a false choice. The choice between accessible education and improved public health. It's not a choice that we have to make. Our long-term economy and, as a result, the federal budget will both benefit if both these goals are served and preserved. There's an old saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that is supremely epitomized by this situation. Last year, an analysis in Health Affairs found that for each 10% increase in local public health spending, the rate of infant deaths and deaths from diabetes, heart disease, and cancer dropped significantly. Preventing these deaths and the costly treatment that precede them could save the federal government large amounts of money and improve the quality of life for countless Americans. So I urge my colleagues to come together to recognize that preventive health care is essential to the futures of this generation that will take advantage of the 3.4% interest rate for their Stafford loans, but other generations as well, generations whose parents they will be, generations who are their parents. This program is essential. The 3.4% interest rate should not be a partisan issue, and we should be closing this loophole regardless of the Stafford loan issue. But one way or the other, we should pay for it by closing the loophole and making sure that students have an affordable interest rate for these Stafford loans. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
The senator from New Hampshire.
Would the
North Hampshire, New Hampshire.
Would the senator from New Hampshire yield for a unanimous consent request?
I will yield to my colleague from Oklahoma.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that at conclusion of the remarks of the senator from New Hampshire that I be recognized for up to 20 minutes.
Their objection? Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm pleased to join my colleagues from Connecticut and from New York and the others who have been here on the floor today to talk about the importance of avoiding, I guess I should say, the potential for the student loan interest rates to rise at the end of June. The fact is that the United States workforce needs to have the skills to compete in the global economy, and that means making sure that college is affordable, because so many of the new jobs that are being created require higher education. And the reality is that students today face ever-growing tuition rates, and that student loans are a critical bridge for them to cover these costs. But unless we act, over 7 million students, 38,000 in my state of New Hampshire alone, 38,000 who rely on subsidized Stafford student loans will see an increase in their student debt when they graduate. Now, this is a particular problem for us in New Hampshire because our students have the highest average student debt in the nation. They are graduating with just over $31,000 in debt per student. And not only do they have the highest average debt, but 74% of our college students are in debt, and that's the second largest number in the country. So we have the highest average debt, the second highest number of students graduating with debt. The fact is that students in New Hampshire and across this country need some relief, and doubling the interest rate is exactly the wrong way we should be going in terms of policies to promote giving every American the opportunity to succeed. We need to encourage our students to go on to higher education, to advanced degree programs, and to professional schools. Their future employment and our future economy both depend on this. Last week I had the opportunity to visit two of our state colleges, Keene and Plymouth University. Everyone I spoke with had stories about the escalating cost of college and concern for rising student loan interest rates. And over the past 24 hours, I've heard from hundreds more constituents who are anxious about this. Now, to be clear, the legislation that we're considering would affect current and future students who will receive subsidized Stafford loans starting July 1st. The last thing anyone needs in this economic climate is a reason not to pursue their undergraduate or graduate studies. Megan Jordan of Amherst is a sophomore at the University of New Hampshire. She told the Union Leader newspaper that student loan debt has become a constant concern for her. Megan says that her parents would do just about anything to pay for her college education in full. But with two brothers also in college, the finances are simply not available. Megan views the prospect of interest rates doubling as an attack on college students trying to make a better future for themselves. Sadly, she said it feels like it's a punishment for trying to obtain a college degree. When I was at Keene State College in Keene last week, I met Keith Couch, a parent who has a daughter at Keene and a son at Boston College. Between his two kids, his annual tuition bill comes to $90,000. No wonder he's having trouble figuring out where the money's going to come from. He spends hours trying to figure out how to figure out how his family will make college payments each month. Loans, he said, help bridge that gap. One constituent, Erin, posted on my Facebook wall that her husband recently completed medical assistant courses at Hesser College in Manchester. He's due to start paying his student loans next month, but he hasn't been able to find a job in his chosen field. Erin said that family finances are tight, and if interest rates were to double on the loans they have, there is no way they would be able to pay them back. The stories that I've heard in New Hampshire are similar to the stories that Senator Blumenthal told about Connecticut, to what Senator Schumer's had to say about New York, to what we're hearing from students and families across the country. Higher education is essential for economic opportunity and personal growth. It's equally essential to the prosperity of our country. And most important, the prospect of higher debt levels affects whether people choose to enter college to begin with. When I was in Plymouth last week, at Plymouth University, a student stood up and he said, you know, I want to teach history. He said, but tell me why I shouldn't just drop out of college and be a mechanic. I said, well, I like teachers myself, and we need more of them. But in this rapidly changing, highly competitive global economy, we should be doing everything we can to make sure that college is more accessible to Americans so that we don't have students across this country saying, why should I not drop out if no one supports my getting a college education? It's critical for all of us. And unfortunately, high debt burdens have serious consequences for individuals, for families, and for the economy. Student loan debt affects where graduates live, the kinds of careers they can pursue, whether they can try to start a new business, when they can start a family, when they can purchase a home, when they can start to save for retirement. Our students deserve better. We need to get rid of any obstacles that are keeping our students from getting the education they need to succeed. We should not put more obstacles in their way. We need to come together, Democrats and Republicans, to stop this increase in student loan interest rates and to do what's in the best interest of our families and our young people who need that college education. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, first of all, I will be introducing a bill in a minute called S3053, but as a kind of a predicate to that, let me talk again about my ongoing investigation of the overreach of the Environmental Protection Agency. Certainly the Washington Post is right on with their editorial. On May 3rd, the Washington Post editorial board penned an editorial entitled, quote, "The EPA is earning a reputation for abuse." Now, in this editorial, they discussed how the former Region 6 administrator, Al Armendariz, philosophy, quote, philosophy of enforcement, unquote, has severely hurt the EPA. To refresh your memory, it was a couple weeks ago at this very podium that I read the quotes that I'm about to quote you again today. And while the Washington Post doesn't agree with me all the time, I was pleased to read that they saw that the crucify policy Mr. Armendariz reported in his visit to Dish, Texas, clearly showed that he preferred to extract harsh punishments on an arbitrary number of firms to scare others into cooperating. And further, the Washington Post editorial board saw this attitude as both unjust and threatening to investors in energy projects. Now, while Armendariz has resigned, he's gone now, his statements have undermined the legitimacy of the EPA's regulatory authorities. Now, we know that the policy of extracting harsh punishment on arbitrary individuals in order to scare others into cooperation was not just an inflated rhetoric. Mr. Armendariz followed through on his philosophy when he had the EPA Region 6 pursue a trumped-up emergency action against a natural gas company, Range Resources, in Texas. The EPA is not using its power fairly and showing its enforcement is arbitrary, unreliable, capricious, and unduly severe. But the Post editorial board didn't see Armendariz as an isolated incident. They also called out EPA's actions in other recent high-profile misuse of power that has hurt the agency's credibility. EPA insisted that an Idaho couple, the Sacketts, stopped construction on a home because that violated the Clean Water Act. Now, on March 21st, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously. This was not a split decision. It was unanimous, 9-0. The EPA had exceeded its authority in pursuing the Sacketts and was ensured that they and other people who find themselves in similar situations can overcome the EPA's assertion of whether or not their property contains jurisdictional wetlands without submitting to the permit process. A mere 2 days later, the EPA was again called out for overreaching their authority on water issues. Then on March 23rd, the U.S. District Court ruled the EPA overreached in revoking a permit to Arch Coal after the Army Corps of Engineers had already granted it. And in quite a blow to the agency, the judge said EPA's claims, and I'm quoting now to what the judge said in his order, that, quote, that Section 404 grants in its plenary authority to unilaterally modify or revoke a permit that has been duly issued by the Corps is a stunning power for an agency to arrogate it to itself when there is absolutely no mention of it in the statute, unquote. That's what the court said. Yet in the midst of scathing rebukes from the press and the courts, EPA is still acting as if everything is the same as it was before. These cases happen, and they're actively pursuing more regulatory power by attempting to vastly increase the scope of the Clean Water Act's reach. In fact, when discussing the results of the Sackett case at an American Law Institute American Bar Association event on May 3rd of this year, Mark Pollins, director of EPA's Water Enforcement Division, said, and I'm quoting now, "Internally, it's the same old, same old. I plan to send a letter to the Administrator Jackson addressing Mr. Pollins' comments and trying to find out how an EPA official in the face of a 9-0 Supreme Court decision could say that the agency is not going to do anything different. And if the EPA is able to finalize their new Clean Air Act jurisdictional guidance, it will have given itself a whole new set of excuses for pushing the boundaries of the Clean Water Act as far as possible. This continued overreach is why we now have bicameral, bipartisan legislation introduced to stop this current guidance overreach. Let's take a moment and go back in time to where this all started. We might remember a couple years ago, Senator Feingold from Wisconsin, Senator Oberstar, Congressman Oberstar over in the House, introduced the Clean Water Preservation Act. The Clean Water Restoration Act removed the word navigable. Now, in this act, it gave the federal government, through the EPA, the jurisdiction over over navigable water. And that was what the law was. Well, they wanted to take out the word navigable, and therefore the EPA would have jurisdiction over all land in the United States. I mean, it's very simple. And it was so unfair that not only did we defeat the Clean Water Restoration Act, the people defeated Senator Feingold in Wisconsin and Congressman Oberstar after they'd been in for a long time. So obviously this is something that is not popular. It is an overreach, and everyone understands it. Now, normally, when the Obama administration can't achieve what they want to achieve through legislation, they do it through regulations. We see this in cap and trade right now. We see that the president tried to get legislation on cap and trade, which would have amounted to a $300 to $400 billion tax increase on the American people. It wouldn't have done any good. It wouldn't have helped anyone. And yet, it would have been the largest tax increase in history. I go back and compare what they were attempting to do to the Clinton-Gore tax increase of 1993. That's where they raised the marginal rates. They raised the capital gains tax. They raised the death tax. This massive tax increase, that was a $32 billion tax increase. This would be 10 times greater than that. Now they're trying to do what they couldn't do with legislation, through regulation. But that's because in order to take a Clean Water Act rulemaking, EPA would have to follow a transparent process and engage in a public comment period, as required by the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, for that reason, they didn't pursue to do that through through regulations. Given how unpopular their proposal has been, going through with the rulemaking would make it much more difficult to obtain the expanded federal control that they're clearly trying to pursue. By changing agency practices in this formal and non-regulatory way, they virtually ensure that they will be able to formalize this agenda easily through future rulemaking. So what they couldn't achieve through legislation, or in this case, through the proper rulemaking, they're trying to do through guidance. Now, guidance, that's out there, not for that purpose at all. What's even more frustrating than the EPA's continued overreach is that this new guidance would provide no improvement to water and would likely hinder real progress on cleaning water. The guidance board broad reach and legalistic language will inevitably shift the balance of regulatory authority further away from states, which are better equipped to protect waters within their borders. Now, given the federal government's control over nearly all water features will not lead to cleaner water. It will, however, lead to tremendous uncertainty, tremendous confusion, and economic pain for farmers, energy developers, small businesses, and state governments by saddling them with more layers of expensive, onerous, and unnecessary federal regulations. It's yet another Obama administration policy that will be all pain for really virtually no gain. Now, Congress has been explicitly clear with EPA that this new guidance is unacceptable. Last July, I led a letter with Senators Roberts, ranking member of the Senate Agriculture Committee, and 39 of our colleagues to Administrator Jackson, where we raised our concerns that this document went far beyond than mere guidance. The EPA and the Corps of Engineers greatly expanded what they can be considered jurisdictional waters through a slew of new and expanded definitions and through changes to the applications and jurisdiction test. Administrator Jackson has said that this guidance will increase the Clean Water Act scope. In the economic analysis that accompanied the guidance, it stated that as few as 2% and as many as 17% of the non-jurisdictional determinations under current guidance would be considered jurisdictional use using the expanded tests under the new guidance. However, this analysis was only for the Army Corps making dredge and fill permit decisions when compared to current practice. Now, the guidance will apply to the entire Clean Water Act, including the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits, the Oil Pollution Act and Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasures plans, water quality standards, and even state water quality certifications, because most states have delegated authority under the Clean Water Act. This change in guidance will also result in a change in the responsibilities of states in executing their responsibilities under the Clean Water Act, and a change in how individual citizens are governed by law. So what we're talking about here is what they've been unable to do with legislation, they were going to be doing with regulation. But in this case, what they really couldn't do with regulation is because it would be too transparent, they're trying to do through guidance. The finalized guidance document is currently at OMB for formal interagency review before it's finalized. And we don't know what changes have been made, but based on a draft that was leaked to the press, it doesn't appear that the document is substantially different from the proposed guidance document that they put out for public comment last May. Now, this is the last step before this expansive document starts being used throughout the country. And that's why I hope all my colleagues here in the Senate on both sides of the aisle will join me in trying to stop it. Now, working with Senators Brazo, Senator Heller, Senator Sessions, and others, we introduced S-2245. We called that the Preserve the Waters of the United States Act, a bill that stops the EPA from finalizing the guidance and from using the guidance to make decisions about the scope of the Clean Water Act or to turn it into a rule. The House has also acted with chairmen and ranking members of the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Agriculture Committees, introduced a bipartisan H.R. 4965. I applaud Mr. Mica and Mr. Rahal in this bipartisan effort, Mr. Lucas and Mr. Peterson and Mr. Gibbs for their actions. These bills do not change or roll back any current protections under the Clean Water Act. They simply stop the EPA and the Corps of Engineers from moving forward and making these unprecedented regulatory changes through a guidance document. The EPA needs to withdraw this guidance document immediately. If it wishes to make changes to the Clean Water Act, it should go through a complete and proper rulemaking process under the Administrative Procedures Act. That's why it's there, so that people will know in America the cost of what these regulations mean to them and what they do and do not do. So why do it under the veil of guidance when they should be doing it out in the open? And that's what we want. And that's all really that we're asking for. Now, I mentioned that I'm introducing a bill today, and going back and refreshing our memory on what happened with the overreach of the EPA. We might remember it was from this podium, I guess 2 weeks ago, it was on a Friday, that we had found out, we had access to a tape that we released to the public, and it's been on the TV and everyone's seen it now, of the Region 6 administrator of the EPA, Mr. Armendariz. And what he did at that time was say, in talking to the regulators that were under his, and along with the public meeting that was taking place in a place in Texas, he said, and I'm going to quote now, but as I said, oil and gas is an enforcement priority. I was in a meeting once and I gave an analogy to my staff about my philosophy of enforcement, and I think it's probably a little crude and maybe not appropriate for the meeting, but I'll go ahead and tell you what I said. It was kind of like how the Romans used to conquer little villages in the Mediterranean. They'd go into little Turkish towns somewhere, and they'd find the first 5 guys that they could run into, and they would crucify them and let them die on a cross. And everyone would look at that, and he said, as you know, that town is real easy to manage in the next few years. That is our general philosophy. This is the EPA we're talking about. And this is one of 10 of the regulators, or of the, this happens to be the Region 6 administrator. This regional administrator recently resigned when not only his statement received attention, but also following public awareness about the manner in which he initiated the enforcement action of Region 6. Now, we know about, and I've already mentioned in my previous remarks about the company that was down in Texas. This company was cited by Armendariz. They are accused of groundwater contamination. They're accused of misusing, perhaps, hydraulic fracturing. All of this was just accusations. But then they sent a letter to him. And they said, we're going to fine you $33,000 a day. $33,000 a day. Now, if you read those letters carefully, you can find out that decision isn't already made. It's not going to start. But to the person who's reading the letter, who receives the letter, they'll think, you know, I can stay in business for 30 more days, and that's it. You have to ask the question, how many companies are out there who have received a letter like this from the EPA and assume that they're going to have to start paying this fine, and so they just fold up their tent and they quit? This is what they want. They want to put people out of business. I told the story from this podium about a company in my state of Oklahoma. This was back probably 10 years ago. I received a letter, and that we had a lumber company in Oklahoma that the president of the lumber company said, I don't know what to do. The EPA has just put us out of business. And I said, what did you do wrong? He said, I don't think I did anything wrong. He said, I've been selling our used crankcase oil to the same licensed operation for the last 10 years, and some of that was this contractor was licensed by the state of Oklahoma and the federal government in the county of Tulsa. And he said, we've been selling it to the same group, this organization, for 10 years. He said, some of that has been traced to a site where they've said that that came from our used crankcase oil is directed to this site. And they said, for that reason, you have violated the law, and we're going to fine you $5,000 a day. Now, $5,000 a day, this is to a relatively middle-sized lumber company, Mill Creek Lumber it was called, and they're still in business today. But that would have put them out of business. I said, send the letter to me, let me read it. And of course, I read it, and I said, they're just threatening it. They're trying to run you out of business. And so, you know, you have to wonder, Mr. President, how many companies are out there that are closed now or out of business because of action like this? How many of these companies who received a letter like the operation did down in Texas saying we're going to impose $33,000 a day finally just fold their tent up and quit? We don't know that. There's no way of knowing it. We've invited people from this podium to call, and we've received calls from people who have been out of business. And this is something that is just an intentional effort that we're dealing with and have been dealing with for quite some time. So we introduced today, just a few minutes ago, S3053. I've got a whole bunch of co-sponsors. It looks like I've got about 20 co-sponsors on the bill. What we do is a very simple thing. I've found in my experience in both the House and the Senate that the shorter and the simpler you make something, the easier it is to understand. This is a little small two-page bill. And all it does is say that anyone who's going to be appointed or nominated, I should say, as a regional administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency that would have to be appointed by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. You know, we have a list in our laws as to what has to have Senate confirmation. The administrator of the EPA has to, and she went through that process. That's Lisa Jackson, but not these 10 regional directors. So we're saying they should be subjected to the same advice and consent of this Senate. And we wouldn't have this kind of problems because I don't know. I suspect that the administrator of the EPA did not know what was going on in Region 6 with Armendariz. And I'll give her the benefit of the doubt that she didn't. In fact, she was very critical of him once we stood here and exposed what's going on. So this will solve the problem, and I'm going to invite people to join in here. We've already introduced it. It's a Senate bill. It's S3053. It's one that is would force the administrators to be subjected to confirmation by this United States Senate. Keep in mind that these administrators, these regional administrators, have the power of life and death over many, many companies in America. So I believe this has solved that problem, and I look forward to passing this and having this become law. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President,
Senator from Iowa.
I ask that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Sarah